my words of wisdom are saved forever. One of the problems I found, of course, with this whole video format is I actually have to I actually have to talk a degree of sense, because it can always be played back to me. I've previously enjoyed standard tasting format where, you know, any old nonsense can be spouted, and you know, I can always deny it later on. So yeah, you know, Zoom tastings have definitely brought in the new era of accountability. But anyway, very, very nice to see you all. Thank you for rejoining, so many of you, in fact. This is officially the first session of series 2 of our wine therapy sessions around the world in 48 wines. So it's great to see a large number of repeat offenders from series 1 rejoining, and also great to see a number of you tuning in for the first time, whether you've signed up for the whole series or just this one as a taster. You're very, very welcome. Now, before we crack on with the session itself, a couple of quick announcements. Firstly, Suzanne, very, very sorry. I know Parcel Force, despite doing their best, managed to smash your bottle of Petit Chablis. So we're very sorry about that. And obviously we couldn't get another one to you in time. We will be winging one out for you to enjoy at a later date. Secondly, happy birthday to Jenny Kenyon. Charlotte Carrington has asked us to mention your birthday. So happy birthday, cheers, many happy returns. I should point out, if there are any other birthdays in future you'd like me to announce, weddings, births, divorces, etc., then, you know, I'm happy to play the radio DJ style act on that front. Charlie, Daniel wants to join us.
Tom. Karen's tomorrow.
Brilliant. Of course. Well, Karen, absolutely. Happy birthday in advance. 30 again. Fantastic. Fantastic. Been looking forward to this session, not least because the weather is, you know, hopefully on the turn a bit, and being able to spend some time in company of, you know, the greatest white wines in the world is always a pleasure. Now, there's obviously a number of people who've tuned in today, who are clearly big Burgundy lovers, big Chardonnay lovers in particular, and so it's a great pleasure to have you with us. For those who are sort of less used to doing a deep dive into one particular grape, one particular region, then, you know, this will hopefully, you know, be sufficiently nuanced, exciting, and define the subtleties and differences of white Burgundy that you'll want to come back for more. So, first of all, has everyone got a nice healthy glass of the Macon Blanc in hand? If not, and even if you do, top it up. There we go. Oh. Perfect. Perfect. I have often been overheard saying, actually, sorry, before we launch in to this evening, I should point out, for those of you who it's the first time this evening, perhaps it's the first time doing a Zoom wine tasting, we can see you all and you can see us. You're all currently on mute. However, everyone here is grown up and responsible. Not that the government seem to think so, but anyway. So please, if you've got a comment, I want to make a point, then the chat function is there. Please do use that. If you'd like to actually ask a question live, then perhaps you could sort of wave a hand or indicate, and then unmute yourself and feel free to ask away. We'll try and run this session for about an hour, but, you know, there'll be a bit of time afterwards for those who want to hang around and ask a few questions. So anyway, good. I think I've covered all the main housekeeping rules. So to Burgundy. Now, those of you who were with us for our Pinot Noir session a few weeks back will remember I talked a little bit about Burgundy obviously, because you can't talk about Pinot Noir without talking about Burgundy. In fact, I think you probably feel rather shortchanged, because I'm fairly certain I've got the same image behind me now here of the Côte d'Or that I had for at least part of that session. So apologies. But when we talk about Burgundy, we very specifically are dealing with two grapes. It's probably the only thing which is not complicated about Burgundy is the grapes. Now, yes, there are other grapes grown. There is some Pinot Blanc grown, for example. There's even some Sauvignon Blanc grown. But to be perfectly honest, we don't really need to spend too much time talking about this, or possibly the only exception to that rule is Aligote. So Aligote, which was once the kind of green mean grape for which there was little other use than using as the base for a Kir, for Kir, or, then, but now, in fact, Aligote is doing quite good things. But anyway, we don't want to be sidetracked by that. We want to talk about this wonderful grape Chardonnay. And Burgundy is unquestionably the spiritual home of Chardonnay. Even before the Cistercian monks who founded the Château de Clos Vougeot in 1336 started planting and cultivating and very specifically working out which grapes worked in which areas best, Chardonnay was planted in Burgundy. In fact, probably the name Chardonnay originates from a village that was in the Burgundy region, in fact. So I'm not sure if the village still exists. If anyone wants to find it whilst I'm chatting, you're very welcome. But probably the most famous early reference and almost indication that we have that white wines were made in this region comes from Charlemagne the Great. So King Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, I should say, in the late 700s, that's AD, of course, the late 700s, he actually owned the hill of Corton, right at the heart of the Côte d'Or. And the story goes that good old Emperor Charlemagne was a massive, massive wine lover, big fan of the old vino, but on the express instructions of his wife, he had to start insisting that they plant white grapes on the hill because she got really tired of him kind of coming home with a red stained beard and getting it all over the carpets and clothes, and probably her as well. So this is why one of the greatest white wines of Burgundy is Corton Charlemagne. So it's the white wine, the Chardonnay grapes, named after Charlemagne, grown on the hill of Corton. So that, if nothing else, has given you a good little dinner party stroke, particularly esoteric pub quiz question answer gem for you. So we've called this session from Macon to Meursault, and this is kind of really indicative of the spread of the viticulture that we'll cover this evening. Obviously, it's quite hard to do a deep dive into such an important region with only 3 wines, but I'd like to think we've got 3 absolute pearlers, which are very, very typical of their style. They're at a very high quality level, and hopefully they will not only give pleasure, but indicate the kind of points that I'm going to make as we go. So I'm going to pull up a map. We all love maps, so wait 1 second whilst I do some screen sharing fun and games. I think this is the right one. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, no, typical. Okay. Right, back. Here it is. Oh, no, there it is. Good. Wait a minute. Let's just pull this along a bit here. All right. Okay, so let's come in a bit, down a bit. There we go. So when we're talking about white Burgundy, we're talking about the Côte de Beaune, specifically this area in here. We're talking far less about the Côte de Nuit, although there are some white Burgundies made here, but this is the region north of Beaune, which is better known for its Pinot Noir, for the reds. And then right up much further north, it's basically a solid hour and a half's drive up to Auxerre, Chablis region here. And it's sort of sufficiently distant, and we'll talk more about Chablis when we come on to it next, but it's almost, I think, correct to think of it as almost a sub-region, a different region of Burgundy. So as I said, we've got the key regions here around the town of Beaune, the famous villages of Meursault and Pouligny-Montrachet, which is where we will finish our journey this evening, Chassaing-Montrachet as well. Also the white wines of Beaune itself are very, very appealing. You've then got some fascinating whites from the Côte Chardonnays, and we could well find ourselves doing a future session on value Burgundy, and it would be impossible not to focus some attention on the Côte Chardonnay, which has incredible reds and whites that are actually still affordable. And then last but not least, and where we are starting, we are here in Macon. So Macon, as you can see, is a fair bit further south. It's about an hour's drive directly down the A6, which pretty much tails the River Saône. And then you come off the motorway here at Macon and pop into the various villages here. Okay, I think I'll stop sharing, but if anyone wants these maps or wants to go revisit them, then do let me know at any point. Okay, so good. So the first two whites that we're starting with are both from the same vintage. It's quite interesting given the geological difference that, you know, we've got a 2.5 hour drive effectively between the Macon in the south and the Chablis in the north, but they are the same vintage. Now, 2018 is a very good vintage in Burgundy. For one thing, it was an abundant vintage. It was the first abundant vintage in quite a while, particularly for the white wines and particularly for Chablis. So Burgundy has been walloped by hail and frost in 15, in 16, devastated by frost, and Chablis by hail lost about 50% of its production. More frost, more hail in 17 has led to very, very small crops. So everyone really rejoiced in 18 because it was a lovely abundant harvest, and it was a very solar vintage, a very warm year. It was so warm, in fact, I think it was the warmest since 2003, and it was also one of the driest. And, you know, this traditionally could mean that you start to get a bit worried about your whites in particular, because they lose the acidity, they lose the freshness, and, you know, they start to lose some of that vivacity which makes them most appealing. However, the big surprise for the 2018 vintage was actually how good the whites are. And you'll see when we come on to the final wine that these two that we're starting with are slightly different in a number of ways, not least because the texture of the 18 wines is a little richer. They don't have the same acidity as the 17, but it's not that they lack acidity, it's just these wines are quite rich. They're quite gourmand wines, in fact, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've got good flesh, good fruit, but also enough density, intensity, and structure to be extremely tasty. So let's actually deal now specifically with our Macon. I'm just going to take a quick sip, excuse me. Throat sanitizer, as we label wine in the house these days. So there's a rather lovely story. I think it's rather lovely about this particular wine. It was 3 years ago, I think. I was in Burgundy in November for the Hospice de Beaune, and I was traveling around visiting producers, growers that we work with, as I tend to at that time of year, you know, looking at the wines ready for the En Primeur campaign in January of the following year. And we were really keen to develop a relationship with a good Macon producer, because we didn't really have one. And although we'd worked with a number of great producers, we really wanted to, work with someone special and directly, and develop that relationship that's so kind of important to our business. And a very good friend of mine had recommended the wines of Nadine Ferrand. And so it took very little persuasion, frankly, for me to hop in my hire car one morning and drive south from Beaune and meet him at Nadine's lovely, lovely domain, which is just in Chardonnay, just off the A6. I'll show you a map in a moment. It's not terribly interesting, but I should show it to you so you see where we are. Now, Nadine Farron is an amazing woman. She took on the running of the domain in 1984, when her husband sadly passed away very, very early, in fact. And she's been running it since then, winning all sorts of awards, not just for her winemaking, but also her business acumen. And she was joined in 2005 by her daughter, Marine Ferrand, and it was Marine who hosted us in the winery for a lovely tasting through all of their wines. And we started with this Macon, which I think is absolutely brilliant, textbook Macon Blanc. It comes from a single hectare vineyard directly outside their winery on a nice hill in Chardonnay. It's 30-year-old vines. It's actually largely organic planting. They're not classified as such, not yet, but they don't use herbicides or pesticides, etc., etc. And for me, it's this lovely, richer Macon-style Chardonnay. So, being that little bit further south, you've obviously got a bit more warmth here. And I think certainly for me, I bought out the big glasses this evening, because I do think good Chardonnay deserves a big glass as much as a serious red. And even now, it's really opening up beautifully. There's definitely these kind of honeysuckle, honeycomb notes, white flowers, touch of cinnamon, dusted brioche. And underneath that, these more tropical notes, sort of melon, papaya, a little bit of guava. It's very, very sexy Macon fruit. Yeah, but at the same time, it's got this fantastic crispness, this good sort of citric grapefruit core of acidity, which keeps it very Moorish and very, very drinkable. There's well, one of the amusing things was when I drove out of Beaune on the morning I did to go and see Marine. It was the very first day of the Gilets jaunes protests in France, and little did we know where it would go, of course. But I headed out of Beaune, and the protests were rather lackluster because it was about 8:30 in the morning. And I drove down to Macon, drove down to Chardonnay, had a wonderful tasting with Marine and my friend, and then we decided to head back to Beaune. Well, we had lunch actually, had a wonderful lunch, and then decided to head back to Beaune, and it was extraordinary. We could not get back onto the motorway. It took us 3 hours driving around, trying to get back onto the motorway, going in all these little villages, trying to head across cart tracks, goat tracks, and eventually, after much persuasion, which involved me going up to the protesters, posing with them for a selfie and giving them all of the samples that I had in the back of the boot of the car. And also, of course, convincing them that I was English and would support them. They actually let me onto the A6, and I had the entire motorway to myself. And I managed to get back to Beaune from pretty much where I'd started in Macon in about half an hour flat. So just goes to show how speedy a Cinquecento can be when you've got an empty road and the Gilets jaunes behind you. So yeah, big fan of the Macon. Teresa, my dear wife, who some of you know, is a huge fan of this wine, although she was very surprised to see it today in a bottle format, because normally in our house it comes in a 3-litre or even 5-litre bag-in-box. It's fantastic. And we, by the way, I'm a firm believer in the quality of decent bag-in-box wines. There's no need to be snobbish. There really isn't. You know, you save on packaging, you save on price, of course, and the quality is very, very good. Especially if like my dear wife, you'll get through 5 liters of wine in as many, I won't say hours, but certainly days. So you know, as I said, I don't think she'd ever seen a bottle before, so it was quite a treat. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on before she hears me. By the way, I'm not looking at the chat here. I should, but I'm seeing some. If people are chatting or making comments, oh, there is some stuff there. Hang on, oh, there it is. Perfect. Sorry, I sometimes don't get this up on my screen, but there we go. So yes, before we move on to the next wine, or whilst you're pouring the next wine, Steph and Dom have just asked me to also wish Curran a very happy birthday. Who apparently he and his girlfriend Rika are also first timers to our Zoom tasting this evening. So that is very good news. Now I'm just going through the chat there in case there's anything I've missed out. Is Simon Nadine Ferrand? Oh, hang on. Oh, sorry. That's Charlie. That's okay. I'll just.
I think there was some questions. Somebody, Suzanne had some grass notes coming up on the Macon Blanc, and then the rest it was some of our usual diatribe of beautiful, not first timers, just doing the chat about puzzles and lockdown, and nothing to do with the wine. So obviously.
Perfect, good, excellent. There we go. Jigsaw puzzle with Burgundy appellations. That is very cool. And Jeremy, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest at all. We've done all the jigsaws in our house, so I'm absolutely 100% ready for a jigsaw swap, frankly. So anytime you want to do so. Ours are mostly of Frozen or Harry Potter, so I'm not entirely convinced. No, okay, fine. We won't do those. Very good. Very good. I
was just saying actually that Rebecca Gibb, who's an MW, has come up with the whole wine map of Bordeaux as a 500-piece puzzle. So for those, awesome. And it's not actually that expensive. I think it's like 20 quid on her website. So there's that, and there's champagne, and she does a whiskey one as well. So for another couple of months of lockdown, I'd recommend them. They are great, and you'll definitely remember where they are.
Totally. I just saw a couple of points there. Catherine and Mark Gilby, hello to you. Global warming, yes, it's having an effect. We'll probably come on to that a bit more later once we've tried all the wines. There is no oak on this wine, Jeremy and Anna. We also, the other 2 wines that we have from Domaine Ferrand, we have their fabulous, we have 2 of their Puy-Fuisses. One is called the Éclat d'Ammonite, which, as the name suggests, has a very fossil-rich soil. It's kind of this very ancient Jurassic soil, and it's incredibly minerally and incredibly intense, sort of 55-year-old vines, and that's fabulous, worth checking out. However, if you like your Chardonnays a little bit more, shall we say, New World in style, we also have their Climat, which is aged 100% in oak, but in different age new oak. So first year, so brand new to 5th year oak. And that is incredible. That is incredibly rich, very, very big. That really is, a 90-year-old vine Chardonnay, which can stand just about anything that you pair it up with. I find it particularly good with the chicken korma, actually. So there we go. That's just me. Yeah. Beautifully designed label. Glennis, sorry to hear you won't make next week. Gosh, lots of chat going on here. This is very good. Oh, yes, Clemmy. Clemmy, lovely to see you as well. Your Charlie mentioned that you were going to be joining us for the first time. That's fantastic. Hello to you and Sam. Was it Sam or, I beg your pardon, Seb. Sorry, yeah. And okay, I think we're just about there. So, moving on to the Chablis. So, now we're disappearing all the way back north to near Auxerre. I'm gonna pull up this. Let's see. Shall I pull up this map?
Probably not.
No. To be it's no. It's really not. It's, to be honest. It's no. Yeah. I'll be honest, it's not terribly interesting. It's not terribly interesting. I'll just, well, just for those, you know, for those who care, I feel bad not giving it a go. So hang on, wait a minute.
Their money's worth. So yeah.
Exactly. Let's have a quick peek. Hang on. This is Charlie. This is when I need you as my lovely assistant Debbie McGee to you know, just.
I'm not putting a skirt on again. I said no.
No, fair enough.
I'm not doing it.
Fair enough. There are limits, aren't there?
Exactly.
Okay, where are you? Could that be it? No.
Whilst doing that, Jeremy.
Sorry, team. Not having.
Whilst you're digging out there, Jeremy's saying that has the oak been downplayed versus 10 years ago. I think there's probably there was a style towards more oaked wines as Australian oaked Chardonnays became very much en vogue, and a little bit like reds that were very sort of fruit forward and very plush. Burgundy was probably less so, but they probably did bring up their sort of oaking levels a little bit, but very much more sort of restrained. And I think there's probably been a slight push in getting more plush and riper fruit out of the vineyards, which counteracts against the Chardonnay. So they probably haven't moved. They probably haven't increased their sort of the amount of oaking that they do. You'll probably just see better techniques in the vineyards to get a better, more expressive fruit, which balances those two out. But that's a very broad brush because everyone's allowed a little bit of leeway. So everyone's playing a little bit more. There's a lot more technique. There's a lot more analysis that goes on within the oaking technology.
Yeah.
Right, you found a map. It's Chablis.
I found a map. Yeah. Is it being shared? Is it looking? Is it looking?
There's some champagne there. No, I'm just kidding.
To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me. So here is our map of Chablis, and I'm just going to pull this onto my big screen here to make it easier to see. I think the key thing of note is.
No, Tom, you've shown us your back screen, which is luckily not your children again or your wife.
Oh, hang on, wait a minute. Is it there now? Yep. Yep.
No, we're still getting just your screensaver now.
Oh,
there it is.
Okay.
Yeah, just like that. That'll do.
Is it there? Good. So the key point really of showing you this map is to see the sort of infrastructure of the way the different vineyards are laid out. And the area in yellow, these are the Petit Chablis vineyards. And these are, you know, Petit sounds a little diminutive. And in a way, I suppose it is, although it's a bit unfair, particularly with reference to Pierrick, Laroche's wines from Domaine Nadine. The Petit Chablis regions or regional areas tend to be called such because they have slightly lesser quantities of this important Kimmeridgian clay, and it's slightly younger Portlandian clay. It's all about clay in Chablis, basically. Although Pierrick swears blind that the kind of authorities in Chablis have actually, you know, they haven't done a proper soil analysis of his vineyards, and there's enough Kimmeridgian clay that it could be Chablis, and therefore you're getting a great bargain buying his Petit Chablis because it's surrounded by Chablis vineyards. It's as good as a Chablis, and yet it's labelled as a Petit Chablis, and therefore you can't charge as much. And breathe. So look, I think we'll get rid of the map. Yeah, definitely not my best. Definitely not my best map night. The point of all of this is what makes Chablis different from certainly the Macon, where we were previously, and where we'll be going to in the Côte de Beaune, is this very, very clay-rich soil, this Kimmeridgian clay soil, and this is what gives Chablis its traditional succulence and minerality, this very crisp acidity, this freshness, this linearity. So everyone, I haven't even had a chance to stick my nose in this yet, so I want to, so hang on. Fascinating, fascinating. I mean, you know, same grape, same vintage, 2.5 hours drive north from the Macon that we started with, and well, you know, recognizably a cousin of the Macon, but still very, very different in character. You feel the acidity much more up in the jawline here. There's a real kind of succulent minerality to the wine. It's very, very nuanced. It's very lean. It really makes your mouth water. You know, I'm now just, you know, the saliva is really going for it some at the moment. I think it's very nice. I think Chablis, and I you know, much as I've said, you know, first glass of white Burgundy at the end of a long day is totally the best thing to do. I've just as equally been caught saying that the wines from Chablis are at once the most overrated and underrated in the whole of Burgundy. And the reason for that is, you know, there's an awful lot of pretty cheap Chablis, which comes largely from cooperatives. I don't mean the co-op, although it does come from the co-op, but from actual, you know, cooperative wineries where they buy grapes at a reasonable price and they sell at a reasonable price. And so, you know, you get wines which have Chablis on a label. And we in Britain, we love Chablis. We love Chablis. And therefore, it really can be pretty anemic, pretty thin, unexciting wine that, frankly, you know, you buy for the name rather than what's in the bottle. However, unquestionably, it provides the best value white Burgundies, the best value quality white Burgundies, because even a Petit Chablis like this has such a sense of mineral depth, such a sense of sort of authenticity to the terroir, that you've really got quite a lot of wine for the money from an increasingly expensive wine region. And the other thing I would encourage you to do, I really would, buy a case of Chablis, Village Chablis, or Premier Cru, if you can. We've got a couple of cracking Premier Crus and even Grand Crus from Langue de Paquis, which are just brilliant. There's such good value, and forget about them. Forget about them for 5 years, because this is the trick to Chablis. If you forget about Chablis for 5 years and you pull it out of the cellar, you'll be utterly amazed by the transformation, by the richness, the intensity, the depth that has developed once given time to evolve. And that's the problem. You see, we in the UK, we drink too much cheap, very young Chablis. You know, you'll see the 19s are out at the moment, and you know, they're too young. They're too young. Whereas Chablis is a great example of, if you have the patience to lay down a case or two of a fairly modest Village or even Premier Cru at, you know, 20-25 pounds a bottle, honestly, in 5 years' time, it will astound you and massively impress your guests. So I do think that's a big tip for this evening, is fall back in love with Chablis, fall back in love with good Premier Cru Chablis, good village level Chablis from top producers, and buy it and forget about it. Don't buy to drink, buy to keep. You know, it's a different mindset from most of the time we think and buy Chablis, but try and get into that mindset.
So, what do you think, sort of, to help people for price points to sort of spend, because it is a big outlay, but, you know, pound for pound they will get huge amounts of enjoyment. I'm totally behind you, but I think there's always people that balk when they're asked to pay 18-20 pounds for a bottle of Chablis. But it may be the right thing to do rather than trying to buy loads at £12.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, you know, White Burgundy, certainly red Burgundy. Many of the great wines of the world, when you buy them, the price at which you buy them, you're not paying what they're worth to drink right now. You're paying for the quality level that they will ascend to over 2 to 3 to 5 to even 10 years time when you start going up the ladder. So it's why, all our sort of cellar plan clients, it's back to that mentality thing. The first thing we say is stop buying to drink, stop buying to drink, buy to replace the maturing wines that you're taking out of your cellar, which you bought, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that's when you see the real value in spending that little bit extra. So I won't labor the point, because this isn't a session on building a wine collection, although we should probably do one of those at some point. But definitely, if you take away one other thing apart from Charlemagne and his beard, then please, if you're not doing it already, get into the habit of buying to replace the mature wines you're taking out of the cellar, out of the wine rack to drink. It's such a satisfying feeling. Modest wines with 4 to 5 plus years age. Honestly, it's so rewarding. So just a little bit more about Pierrick himself. So Pierrick Laroche, a very sexy, I think he's 23 or 24. He's certainly young. He's a youngster, annoyingly young, and very, very talented. He did his enology course in Beaune, and then headed off, as a young man should, and woman, of course, round the world, and worked as a winemaker at Villa Maria. I think unarguably New Zealand's most famous Sauvignon Blanc producer. So he really earned his spurs, as it were. And I think, like so many of the new generation of winemakers from the old world, it's such a breath of fresh air. It's so eye-opening to go across to the new world and see a rather more modern take on winemaking. Taking up sort of a stance which is less entrenched in tradition, and perhaps ways of making wine which are a little bit outdated, shall we say, and less, frankly, appealing to the modern palate. So anyway, Pierrick came back, and then in 2009, he convinced his father, who had been slowly but surely buying up parcels of land over I think 10, 20-year period, but selling the grapes on to Chablisienne. So Chablisienne is a name I'm sure some of you will know. It's certainly available in places like Waitrose, Marks and Spencer's, and I'm sure a few other supermarkets. It's actually a cooperative, and I know I've just bashed cooperatives, but Chablisienne is actually one of the best cooperatives in the world. It really is. The quality of the wines they make is terrific, and they are certainly the biggest. But the reason that they're so good is because they were able to source fruit from vineyards owned by people like Pierrick's father. So when Pierrick got on board, one of the first things he did was decided, I want to make my own wine under our label. Domaine des Hat is an old sort of French term for like a measuring rod. It was sort of a unit used to measure out vineyards, basically. I think it had something to do with the distance between the rows, so you could turn a horse or something like that. I can't quite recall, but anyway, that was the archaic name for at was a rod, basically. So at the tender age of 23, Pierrick rather took on the family domain, and the first thing he wanted to do was stop using herbicides, stop using pesticides, start working by hand, and most importantly, keeping most of the fruit for themselves and making their own wine. And, that's a big decision to take, because, you'll get a healthy annual income by selling Chablis grapes to the cooperatives. All you have to do is grow them and ship them, grow them and pick them and send them. And all of a sudden, to go off on your own and start making your own wine, develop your own brand, marketing, explore different markets, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And he went off and did that. And fair play to him. Within a year, you know, his first vintage, 2010, within a year, he had the Wine Advocate saying he is one of the new Chablis growers to look out for. Decanter kind of picked him up, and you know, he's definitely, I wouldn't say a rising star. I think he's pretty much a risen star now, but definitely he makes wonderful, wonderful wines, great purity, great focus and clarity. And what is interesting is the focus he puts on this wine, his Petit Chablis, of which he owns, you know, 12.5 hectares, of which the biggest portion of that is right by Chablis vineyards, which he swears has the same soil as the Chablis vineyards and should be classified as such. So, you know, total bargain, basically. Total bargain. And brilliant with oysters. Who's got oysters tonight? Who has a nice plate of oysters in front of them? And if not, why not? Anyone would think you've been locked in the house for the last 12 weeks. Very disappointing. God, that's one of the first things I'm going to eat when I get out of here. Oysters, I have to say. Probably with a magnum of Chablis. Maybe I'll even let my wife have a glass. We'll see.
Why do you bash yourself with the stick? Why?
I don't think she can hear me, luckily. So, you know, yeah.
There are 50 other people on this call that may or may not know your wife.
It is recorded, Tom.
Yes, Andrew. Hello. Yes. Oh, good. I thought you were about to give us a comment of great erudition there. Simon makes a point that 25 pounds is it's a lot of money to pay for a bottle of wine. And it's funny when you put things in context now, where you find value, what the opportunities are to spend less or more, of course. And one of the big challenges in Burgundy, I would say slightly less so in Chablis, because I think, fun enough, as you get above the sort of £7, £8, £9 supermarket level, you actually start to get great value beyond that. But I think one of the opportunities to recognize is that the general quality of white Burgundy actually full stop, from the very basic wines right the way through, have got so much better than they were 10, 15 years ago. So actually, you may pay a lot more for what was a sort of a lower entry point Burgundy than you would have done 10 years ago. But the quality of that wine is going to be almost on a par with the sort of the grade above, if you like. I'm just having a look at a few other.
I can see Joe's asked that, can you keep Chardonnay for too long? And it's a very long question, because obviously Chardonnay is one of the most versatile grapes. So made at the cheap end, you can't keep it long at all. But some of the most renowned wines of Burgundy, the sort of top Corton Charlemagnes and the Bâtard Montrachets, can be kept for a very, very long time. And quite impressively so, but then you get to taste one, it might not be to your liking, actually. So it's a very personal choice, because it goes to quite a sort of mushroomy, not as fresh as you'd like for a white wine. So it becomes a very much a sort of personal choice. So in short, yes, you can keep Chardonnay too long, and you do need to have thought that if you're buying standard Chablis without it going into Premier Cru or Grand Cru Chablis, that you're keeping it for 2, 3, 4 years and then drinking it over the next 2 years. You don't have to, there's not a 1 month window where it's perfect. And if anything, where we know is that, you know, pop one open if you're lucky enough to have bought 12. The game is pop one open, and if you think, actually, I'm really enjoying this, keep on drinking it. If you're not enjoying it, wait a little bit longer, but not too long. And unfortunately, if you wait too long and you pop it open, you know, keeping it that much longer is not going to make it that much better. Unfortunately, you need to start figuring out new white wine sources quite quickly for your meals.
I think, Karen, just picking up on your comment here in the feed, so actually, yes, you pulled out your Domaine de Monti 2015, but you can be It was good though, wasn't it?
It's absolutely delicious. We've got about 2 bottles left.
Yeah, yeah. But to be fair, you've got more coming, which is good. But also, you know, 15 is a vintage which was very, very forward. It was very ripe and lush. So actually, much more even than, you know, I would be drinking 15s ahead of 13, ahead of 14, ahead of 16, 17 and 18. So actually, you know, drinking 15 white Burgundies now, as I said, that's your 5 years age. You know, you've got 5 years bottle age, and actually you're at the beginning of the sweet spot, but you know, you're definitely in the sweet spot. So it's not too bad. It's not infanticide.
No, very good advice, Tom. Thank you.
Sure. Now before we move on, I don't want to miss, here we go. So actually one other incredibly important birthday that we have, which I've just found out about, is it's actually Paul's birthday, Paul Blue's birthday tonight. And the reason this is particularly important is he's actually turning 18. So this is the first time apparently he has ever consumed alcohol, the first time ever in his life. So well done. I mean, amazing. What does it taste like, Paul? I'm impressed. Wow.
Hey, a fresh palate. Let's get alive to the fresh palate that's never tasted Chardonnay.
Excellent. Jeremy, again, you just mentioned about are people breaking away from co-ops? Is it a general trend? Well, to be honest, yes, it was. Given the current situation, I think you'll find a number of the smaller producers having little option but to return to the fold and go back to the bigger négociants, the bigger maisons, and selling their grapes or asking for contracts back. Because sadly, unless you're very well established now, and frankly, even if you are, now is a very tough time for small winemakers. So it's certainly for us, sorry, just get more birthday requests. For more, you know, for small winemakers, it's really important to support them, like small businesses, I think, frankly. And you know, one of the things that we've been so pleased about at Honest Grapes over this very, very difficult period is we've been able to keep going, frankly. So that's obviously great for us as a business. But it's great because we're able to keep buying wine. Simple as that. We can keep getting pallets on the water from France, from Italy. We can keep supporting small growers. And I think, you know, that never more than before, you know, than now, sorry, is super, super important. So yes, let's keep the grapes from going to the cooperatives and keep them coming into your homes via us, ideally. Now, team, I'm just conscious that we're actually, God, it's nearly approaching 7:25, and we've still got a wine to do. So I hope everyone's poured that and is enjoying it. I very foolishly didn't follow Charlie's advice and have kept this in a wine sleeve, wine chiller thing throughout this tasting, which was very foolish. Which really was, I mean, that was a rookie error. I mentioned right at the start that, you know, I think it was actually before we even started recording, about you know, chilling white Burgundies. Honestly, the higher up the scale you go in Burgundy, the more you want to serve them as close to room temperature as possible, because we do have this tendency in restaurants, the homes of very few friends of mine, and in the US as well, of over chilling white Burgundy. And the problem with that is that you freeze off all of the subtle top notes. You never want to serve a really good white Burgundy when there's condensation on the glass. For me, that's the kind of rule of thumb. It's not a fault or a problem if there is. You just leave it till it's warmed up. But if you consider that, why do we keep cheap vodka in the freezer? No one likes the taste of room temperature Smirnoff, unless it's, you know, 4 in the morning, frankly. But, you know, and the reason you keep it in the freezer is quite literally, it mutes the taste. It freezes so many of the, in this case, fairly unpleasant elements. But sadly, if you do that with great white wine, you do much the same thing. You freeze off all the subtle top notes of the wine. So if, like me, you rather foolishly kept this a little bit on the cool side, I'd encourage you to open it up in the glass, pour a bigger glass right now, and let it properly evolve and develop, and let those aromas really open up. You'll get a lot more out of it.
For those who are in a rush, the old two hands around the glass helps you a little bit, you know.
But I'm going to have another bash at one more map. I know I've not been hugely successful thus far, but we'll see how we go here.
I'm just going to go.
No, I think I've got this one. Look, I've got it nailed. I've got it nailed. Here we go. Me and technology. Great. So now you should all be able to see this rather nice map of the Côte de Beaune specifically. And for our final white of the evening, and we called this from Macon to Meursault, and we are here in Meursault at Domaine de Monti. So this is, well, undoubtedly one of the top domains in the whole of Burgundy. You know, it was founded in 1730. Hubert de Monti took over from his father in 1947 when they had about 2.5 hectares. And then his son Etienne became co-manager in 1995, whilst he was actually working for, I think, BNP Paribas. I think it was certainly a French bank. During his co-stewardship, he took, they bought a number of parcels of really rather impressive vineyards, in fact, including probably Pouligny-Montrachet's top vineyard, Pierrick, right next to Grand Cru Montrachet. They also got a wonderful patch of Corton Charlemagne, which we mentioned earlier. That was in the mid-2000s. They also got a fantastic, the peach of a section of Malconsour, Von Romanée Malconsour, right next to Domaine Romanée-Conti's La Tâche. The vineyards, the vines, literally separated by nothing more than a fence post. And they've now got 37 hectares. What's fascinating is that they are, for me, the only top 10 domain in Burgundy which makes equally good red wines and white wines. So much so that when we were out in Burgundy last year, we asked Etienne and his wonderful winemaker Brian Siev, who's Canadian, to do our Hospice de Beaune barrels. So last year, we did our first Honest Grapes Club barrels of Burgundy, and we did 2 barrels of Pommard Premier Cru and 1 bottle, that would have been very, very weak, and 1 barrel of Meursault, which was about 50% Premier Cru, in fact. And we went to the Hospice, we bid on the barrels, it was all very exciting, good fun, did the tastings, and Etienne and Brian are now doing the élevage and are preparing them for us and for our club members who brought into this, and we effectively crowdfunded the barrels, and it was a huge amount of fun, and we're going to do it again this year for sure. In fact, we have a similar project coming up with our dear friend Jane Eyre very shortly, so we'll keep you in the loop for that. But you know, Etienne and Brian make incredible wines, both white and red. They've been organic since 1995, biodynamic since 2005, and you know, the quality is just on the up and up. Now, what's particularly interesting here is we've dropped down a vintage. We're now 2017. So if 2018 was a vintage which surprised critics for its quality because it was so ripe and rich and people thought it wouldn't have acidity, 2017 is, you know, arguably the best white Burgundy vintage since 2002. I think 2014 has a touch more density, but for pure elegance, precision, class, and just all around wow factor. 17 is an incredible white Burgundy vintage, in fact. And the wine that we're drinking this evening from de Monty, this is all from fruit sourced from declassified Puligny-Montrachet vineyards just around the vineyards of Corbeau in Puligny-Montrachet. So technically speaking, we probably should have called this from Macon to Puligny, but it didn't sound as good. And the winery is in Meursault, and so I think it's all fine. You'll forgive me in time. But this is a parcel of vines which was previously owned by the Chateau de Puligny-Montrachet, and which Etienne bought in 2012. And funny enough, whilst he was still, I think he convinced the bank he was working for to offer loans to the chateau whilst he was working for the bank. And then he bought the chateau afterwards. So clever man. I mean, he's done well. He's a very savvy chap, Etienne. And so you've got wonderful fruit that is sourced really from some of the top vineyards around Puligny-Montrachet, made in the winery in Meursault. And for me, this is when Burgundy starts to get so exciting. It's really it's really a great wine. Oh gosh, I see some dancing in the background there from Becca. That's very good. I'm sorry, I can see you, so there's no getting away with that. I hope you're dancing because you're loving the wine, basically. Now, Karen asking, should we keep this another 2 years? You could quite easily, without a shadow of a doubt. Again, this is a wine at around about the £30 bottle. It's not inexpensive. At the same time, it's not as expensive as a lot of Burgundy, but it will definitely continue to develop. I personally, we've also got the 2018, but it hasn't been shipped yet. That's only available by the case. When that is shipped, I will almost certainly be drinking the 18 with all that richness. Imagine this wine, but from the 18 vintage. I will be drinking it with that richness ahead of the 17. I think 17 is such a good vintage at whatever level. Again, it's a bit like I was saying with Chablis, of any degree of quality. Buy 17 Burgundy and forget about it. It's really, whatever your budget, buy some nice vintage, 2017 vintage, but white Burgundy, and just sit on it and forget about it, because at whatever level, it's such a good year that it will develop brilliantly. And the reason for that was 17 was quite a cool vintage by comparison to 18. And what that means is that you've got more pronounced acidity in the wine. And particularly in a white wine, you've got to have good acidity for aging the wine. You don't have the benefits of tannin. And frankly, alcohol, as in alcohol level, is not of great importance in Burgundy anyway, because you shouldn't really be much above 13.5%. 2018 is an interesting point. There were some Burgundies I tried which were tipping 15%, if you can believe that. But, we didn't buy those, don't worry. But certainly, a vintage like 17 with such keen acidity such keen acidity is definitely going to age for a long time. And the way that Etienne makes this as well, it's in big oak barrels, not new oak, but big oak barrels. And they do a lot of stirring of the lees. So kind of the physical matter, they get lots out of it. And this gives it so much more texture and weight than you might normally find at this level. But it's a hell of a wine. And I got to say, I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves. So look, I'm turning over to the chat function now, because there's a few interesting things here. Jeremy, you were asking about the range of de Monty wines. Oh, I mean,
that's a separate tasting.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a great tasting. I mentioned that they, for me, are unique in Burgundy in producing absolutely 5-star quality whites and reds. They're mostly based in and around Beaune. So for the reds, it's Pommard and Volnay. The wine I take every year for myself, because I'm a lowly wine merchant and it's all I can afford, they're Beaune Grève, Premier Cru. for me is about the best value Burgundy that I try on an annual basis. That for me is one wine I take every single year. On the white front, similarly, Beaune White Premier Cru, superbly underrated and fantastic. They do amazing Meursault. Really, I mean, Meursault is their sweet spot for sure, and a couple of great Pouligny's, and then of course on Chardonnay Grand Cru. And last but not least, sorry, to go back to the reds, I mentioned the Macon Vineyard next to Charme, next to La Tâche is just incredible. So Claire's just asked, can you go through those on the flavor profile of the last wine? Yeah, sure. Let's yeah. Quite nice to actually taste it and come up with something fresh rather than just read stuff that I wrote ages ago when I first tried it.
Yeah, just remember it's recorded, so people will be able to confer against your earlier notes of babble after 42 samples. So, I'll let you taste. But it's a good point that this wine is obviously the Bourgogne Chardonnay is always the entry level. It's the calling card for a lot of these Burgundy producers. So they're really good. If ever you want to sort of choose around and try and find a producer, this is their entry level. They normally do it with red and they normally do it with white, and it's their declassified fruit. And if they're really worth their salt, their entry level wine should taste absolutely amazing.
It has to be like a business card. It has to be it's like, you know, it's the classic example of making a first impression. If you don't put care and attention into that first impression, then why is anyone going to come back? So, Etienne and Brian, they are brilliant fun. They're classy individuals, and their Bourgogne Blanc, for me, massively outshoots its sort of AOC level. In terms of the flavor profile, I mean, right now, I'm still getting quite a lot of primary, a lot of primary citrus. In terms of broadening that out, there's a touch of orchard fruit character, green moving to red apple fruit as well, real apple skin. You're starting to move to maybe, I'm not on anything particularly tropical yet, on nose or palate, but there's definitely some spice elements coming out as well. A bit of that nutmeg and cinnamon character too. What I really love, which is a sign of true class, is that salinity on the finish. There's that wonderful sapidity, that saline finish. It just drives the palate on. It really does encourage you to want another glass. And one of the fascinating things, I remember having dinner with Etienne years ago now at the Château de Pouligny-Montrachet, and he blind tasted us. He brought out a bunch of magnums, and they were blind, and that's always a hideous thing for me, because frankly, all you can do is fail. If you get them right, you're like, well, that's your job. If you get them wrong, which frankly, at least if not quite half the time, but getting on for half the time, I'm not as right as I would like to be. And he brought them out, and what was fascinating was that we had, when it was all revealed, we had a 2003 Pouligny-Montrachet Carré and a 2010. Now, 2010 is a heralded vintage in Burgundy. 2003 was considered at the time practically Californian, and it was so hot, the wines were so lacking in acidity that everyone wrote them off. And the fascinating thing, and I remember this to this day, was Etienne told me that great terroir will heal the vintage. And it's so true. It's never more true than with Burgundy, white and red, that whatever the style or character of the vintage, given time, you cannot stop the quality of the soil, of the thousands, the millennia of geological strata that is trapped within that wine, sucked up through the roots, coming out. So again, it's another great reason to just keep your Burgundies longer than you feel you should, because you will be thoroughly rewarded for doing so. Good, gosh. So I know a couple of people have had to dash off. Sorry, Dom and Steph have gone. Simon, lovely to see you as well. Thank you. Great to see you. Brilliant. I'm not going to disappear immediately. Of course, those of you who do need to dash, please go with our blessing. I know there's a number of you coming back next week for, is it Austria, Charlie? No, Grape Austria. Yeah.
Austria, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a really fun session on Austria coming up next week. Then we also have Grape Expectations, where we're looking at some grapes which you're possibly less familiar with, or at least even if you aren't, they get less kind of airtime generally. So that'll be rather fun. And then we've got a fantastic South African session the week after that. And Charlie and I are just putting together an Australian session, kind of new wave Australia as well, including an amazing Tasmanian Pinot. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. As well as that, we've also got a few grower tastings. We've got Wine Car Boot as well with lovely Ruth Spivey. Charlie, in fact, is doing a wine therapy nights session for those of us with young children or who are working horribly late hours because all your colleagues have been furloughed. So that'll be starting at 8:30. And that Charlie will basically it'll be a Venus bedtime story. So lots to come.
I've got 3 young children, so I'm quite looking forward to that. Three bottles from 8:30 onwards. And I'm going to set up a camp bed in the office. That'll be fine.
And it's all
Tom. Yeah. Tom, may I ask a question from Putney?
Of course,
here?
Simon, please. Yeah.
How is the 2019 vintage looking, and any particular recommendations?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. And anyone would think that I asked you to ask that, Simon. So when I was out in Burgundy in November, the main focus was trying the 2018s. At the same time, we, of course, got very involved in the Hospice de Beaune to do those Hospice barrels that I mentioned, which were the 2019 vintage. 2019 Burgundy, a very good friend of mine, the former régisseur of Domaine Faverly, said he thinks it could be the best vintage since 1893. So yeah, I think the amazing thing about 2019 is it was another solar vintage. It was very, very hot, but unlike 18, which was just continually hot for a very long time, 19 had some pretty extreme heat spikes, but it got so hot, it actually closed down photosynthesis. So it actually stopped the fruit from getting overly mature, from losing its acidity. So in fact, 19, a bit like the 19 Bordeaux's that we're trying at the moment, despite being another hot vintage, there is an acidity and a freshness and a pure class that is absolutely compelling. It was a smaller vintage. I think they lost at least 20% to frosts and a little bit of hail. But in terms of quality, 19 is going to be, I think 19 is going to be up. It's going to be a different style from 15, but up there with 15 and up there with 2010. For Burgundy, it's going to be absolutely unmissable. So I cannot wait to try the wines in November and possibly a little bit before. The Charme Chambertin, no, I didn't. Yes, the Charme Chambertin barrel I mentioned with regards to Jane Eyre. That's what we're crowdfunding. We're about to launch that. We tried her. She had a barrel and a half of Charme Chambertin 19. It was staggering. And we're going to buy the whole lot and get people to just buy shares of the barrel. So watch this space. Watch this space.
So Tom, following up on that, when will the 2019 be on Primeur?
January. It'll be launched in January. Yeah. So we finished the 18 campaign tail end of February, a little bit into March. They get earlier every year because the demand is so significant that there doesn't seem any need to wait. We get people asking us to reserve them certain wines from pretty much before Christmas. So Burgundy, actually, Karen and everyone, Burgundy is I think perhaps, well, Bordeaux is similar in some respects, but I tend to find in Bordeaux, I'm not so loyal. I'm not so loyal in Bordeaux. In Bordeaux, when it's a great vintage, and there are so many of those, I will often find myself buying, you know, the best value, best rated chateaus that I can afford and recommending the same to clients, you know, rather than buying the same ones every year. In Burgundy, however, I'm far more loyal to specific growers, and I feel that, you know, if you like a particular grower's style, you will like them in 18, you will like them in 19, you might like them slightly less in 14 or 13, but you'll probably still like them more than an entirely different grower in a better vintage, you know? That's not to say actually that 14 isn't a great vintage. It's just, you know, it's much easier to fall in love with a particular domain in Burgundy and stick with them, you know, and different wines give different expressions of the same character at different times as they develop. There we go. Now I really am talking nonsense, but you know, but it's true.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
So the last wine we had, absolutely lovely. Really, really liked it. The Chardonnay. And if we were to say we were to buy a case, how long would it get and keep it for 3 or 4 years? Would it get significantly better?
Yes. Yes, I absolutely, I know it will. I know it will because
In what way?
So,
sorry.
No. It's absolutely important to kind of clarify what one means by better, because, you know, I think Charlie quite rightly pointed out earlier that, you know, as Chardonnay evolves, it takes on very different characters. Now, there'll be, I think, plenty of people, I hope, here this evening who will drink this 2017 and go, wow, that's delicious. That's exactly what I look for in a white wine. And I'm going to absolutely bosh it straight away, job done. However, for me, I recognize more than anything the potential of this wine and this vintage. And what I find what I know will happen and what I know appeals to me personally is that the acidity, which will act as the backbone of the wine, will soften slightly as the fruit character, as the spice character, particularly kind of nutty, buttery element will start to push forward a bit more. So that acidity acts as the backbone, and it allows everything else around the wine, which for me is there but quite nascent, to kind of develop and expand and become a bit more full, a bit more supple. That would be the answer for me.
So in normal speak, in fact, just that sharpness that you get when you're drinking now and that mouth-watering acidity, that begins to just fade away, and you're getting just a lot more of that really lovely plush fruit flavour that you can just about taste now. And that becomes just that much more dominant, basically. And so it's just a little bit more. It's just a little bit more rounded in the mouth. So basically, you don't get that acidity. When we talk about acidity, it's literally on the sides of your tongue and basically in your lower jaw. You can feel it, saliva picking up, and that's that acidity. And as it ages, that sort of drops off and it softens, and you just get a much more fuller mouthfeel. Basically, is the best way to explain it.
So, how many years do you perceive? Are we talking about 2 years? Are we talking about 5, 10?
You know,
I would be
the best thing to do. I'm going to cut across you just a second. The best thing to do is to go. At one stage, you've kind of got to put your marker in the sand and go, right, do you know what? I'm going to buy a case of this wine, and I'm going to be really religious about it, and I'm going to drink 1 bottle every year, and I'm going to be really boring. I'm going to take a notebook, and I'm going to go, right, this is what I thought of it in 2020. This is what I thought of it in 2021. And it sounds really boring, but it's unfortunately the only way you'll get to know what is your tipping point, because some people love really old, very tired Burgundy. Some people want them brand new, fresh out of the box, and that's what they prefer. And it's the tipping point between being quite excited about wine to actually getting really into wine is beginning to take notes and trying to remember. Vivino's really good for that, and there's loads of other apps. And it's just trying to remember, and that's where the difference is, basically. So, I mean, for me and for Tom, this will last another 5 years, definitely. And it's actually not even, for us, it's actually too early to drink. And we'll probably, I've got some, and we'll drink it five to 6, 7 years.
Wow.
Would I drink it after 10 years? Just out of pure interest, yes, but we've moved on to something else.
I think, and just the only thing I would add to that, completely agree, the only thing I'd add to that is the one way to slightly short circuit the process is don't finish the bottle. Don't finish the bottle. Keep it. Keep some in that bottle, literally, even if it's half a glass. I never. Unlikely. Yeah, I know, no, but listen, honestly, I mean this. No, because for
I think he's looking at me there.
Yeah, no.
I think we have similar wives.
This is hide it away. This is a very serious point. It's genuinely a serious point. With any very young wine like this, the best thing you can do is just try and be disciplined enough to keep enough for a glass for the next day, because I work on the basis that for every extra 12-hour period you can keep a wine open, it gives you an indication of how many years that you can continue to let that wine evolve. So, you know, if you keep literally just a glass, or even if you could be very disciplined, 2 glasses, try to have 1 glass tomorrow, see how it evolves. Okay. Fine. You've got 1 sorted. Then even
Tom, is that in the fridge or out of the fridge?
In the fridge. In the fridge is good, you know. But
and just sticking the cork in the top is fine, or we look at taking the air out?
Yeah, no need to do that. Don't need to do that. Just stick the cork in, and it's purely an experiment. Whenever I try young wines, and I'm able to
going back in.
Yeah. Honestly, just pop it in. Try it tomorrow at lunch or at dinner, whatever, and just try, and you'll see that aeration will have an effect on the evolution, and that will give you some indication of how the wine will evolve. Not a totally true one, but at least some idea of how the wine will evolve.
And if you can go 48 hours, is that then another year or no?
Wow. I mean, if you can go 48 hours, Karen, then you're not the Karen I know. So.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Thank you. I love that idea.
Brilliant. Great. Well, look, team, it was lovely to see you all. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for these who've joined us for the first time. I hope you'll join us for more. Looking forward to seeing everyone who's already signed up for the next session. That's great. We will.
Tom, can I interrupt for a moment? Are you about to go? Yeah. Are you about to go off and record first dates? Are you, in fact, Fred?
No, but I know Fred very well, so I've got some great fun stories of activities with Fred. But I'm not.
Come on, share, dish the dirt, Tom.
I'm, you know, what can I say?
Try it with a French accent.
I could, yeah. I'll try it with a French accent. Unfortunately, my French accent is as good as Fred's, but I don't keep myself in anywhere near as good condition as he does. So you won't find me boxing or running up the stairs of the Hilton every day. So, no, Fred is a very good guy. He's a very good guy indeed.
Oh, well, thanks. It's been a lot of fun this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Tom.
Amazing
to see you.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys. We'll raise a wine glass for a toast. Oh, I'm loving that circling of that.
Everybody. Thanks, Tom and Charlie.
For having.
And a photo.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Enjoy the rest of your birthday, Jane.
See you soon, guys. Thank you.
Stay alert, I think.
It's you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Big kisses.
No problems. Pleasure. This is where the stragglers end up.
I think everyone's hungry.
Yeah, well, they've got to go clapping. They got to go do their clapping. Or they've either drunk all 3 bottles on their own and forgotten that they've still got it running.
Should I ask? English champagne.
Sorry, that broke up again.
sorry, last week you mentioned something about English sparkling wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it still, just because I want to get my mum involved?
Yeah, no. So we had planned for the 27th an English sparkling wine versus champagne tasting with Rodolphe Fréjon-Frère Tattanger and Corinne Seeley from Exton Park. Both of them are very, very dear friends. Unfortunately, Corinne has had coronavirus and has had sort of symptoms have come back. So she's so keen to do it that rather than finding another English sparkling wine producer, we're rescheduling to the, Charlie, what do you say, the 6th of June?
Yeah, I think we're doing 6th of June, yeah.
Sounds one. We'll wait for that. I hope
watch this space and we'll get on that for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Hi.
Hi.
That was absolutely fantastic. And I don't like Chardonnay normally. And
that was going to be our original. Anything but Chardonnay was going to be the.
I'm an ABC girl.
There we are.
And an Irish girl at that. So I think we messaged you, Charlie, because my family are all in Ireland, and I quite like to do something with all of them. So if we can manage it as a gift, can we, in a couple of weeks' time, get it all sent so that we can do all this online with them as well?
Absolutely, we'll have the mute function on full, but it'll be fine. I'm sure we've not a bit of bother, boyo.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. Dangerous. As an Englishman, that's dangerous.
And they'll be still on for about 3 or 4 hours afterwards, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. I'll book out a couple of days. Should be fine. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. But Zoom lets me have 48 hours straight, so I have to stop after that. But yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, we'd love to.
We did actually, Catherine.
To Ireland in that scenario.
We did actually. We had some good friends of ours, good long-standing clients who moved out to Dublin about 6 months ago, who joined us for a tasting a couple of weeks ago, actually. So we can certainly get wines out, and that's no problem, and it'll be fun. So we can pull that together without a problem.
Jethro, Jethro, share the tunes. There's some good tunes going on with Jethro. What are the tunes? I'm just trying to hear. It seems we're having a good time. Sorry, was there any other questions? I'm going to go and thank our NHS.
Yeah, good point. 4 minutes for that, yeah.
There we are.
How long in advance do we need to book for Ireland then?
Couple of weeks, 10 days or so. I think just to give us Luke, who's on the line here. Luke has been unbelievably just amazing, manning our Clapham office and ensuring that wines get all over the place, including to Jersey and the sort of not out of Hebrides. Well, we have had wine getting out of Hebrides, but I think so that he doesn't leave the company, doesn't have a heart attack in that order. I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, providing neither of those two things happen, I think Tom's right. About 10 days should be safe.
After the bank holiday. I think you've got like a...
The sooner the better. I've lost track of when this bank holiday is coming, actually, but there is one soon.
Yeah, we'll contact you tomorrow and get it all.
Yeah, the sooner the better. That would be great.
Yeah,
brilliant. Yes, guys, well done. Loved it.
Fab, brilliant.
Thank you, guys. It was lovely to see you. Really appreciate you coming.